Okay, well, hello everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on whereabouts you're joining us from. Thank you all for participating in this first webinar organized by calj. We are absolutely delighted to introduce webinars as a new format for programming. And just to let you know, shortly after the webinar, we really appreciate your feedback. So we prepared a very, very, very brief survey, and we will be circulating it this afternoon, and we hope that you'll be able to give us some feedback so that we could learn from your feedback and incorporate it into future calj events. Before we get started, just a couple of small housekeeping items. First, we have a lot of people joining us on the call today, so lines have been muted to minimize background noise. And of course, questions are absolutely welcome and encouraged. And we will reserve a few minutes near the end of the webinar to address any questions. If you have questions as we go along, please just use the chat function, which is at the very top of your screen, and we will reserve some time at the end to answer as many questions as we can. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, Minik Sherratt. Minik is an expert in marketing, and we are absolutely thrilled that she's able to join us today. Minik, I will go ahead and pass the hosting duties over to you. And if there's anything I could do to help, just call on me.
Very good, thank you.
Let me just see if I can find you again. There you are.
Very good. Okay, so you can hear me and can you see me?
We can see your screen.
Okay, very good. I'll leave my little profile avatar instead of turning on the webcam because that will help us with some of the bandwidth on my end. So let me just make sure my slides are going to advance. There we go. Thank you first off for inviting me to present. I am always very happy to talk about social media strategies. And most of what I do with boxcar marketing is consult with publishers on ways to find productive and efficient ways to integrate social media with their existing marketing channels. So I'm enthusiastic about digital marketing, but I also recognize the main problems with it. Many people find that they're not generating enough traffic from their social media or not enough sales. It can take up too much of your time. Sometimes you try advertising, and although the costs are low, so are the outcomes. So I understand all those challenges. And using social media in a business context can be more challenging than what you face using social media to connect with friends and family, or as a scholar engaged in research and online discussion. So with those main challenges in mind, I have a webinar packed with tips. We're going to start with some quick wins that will work for any journal, and we'll end with more strategic plays that require a bit of time and a small budget. So my aim is 45 minutes. We'll leave 15 minutes at the end, and I can answer any specific issues that you might have. I will also share my slides and contact details at the end. So to make the webinar as relevant to you as possible, I did some research into whether the journals listed on the calj website are using social media to market their journal. And if yes, I was interested in what tools. So I was surprised to see of the 109 journals listed, that is a pretty even split. And actually, it skews a bit more to no if I remove the journals who don't have their own independent social media presence, but rely on publishers or university departments to post content for them. So what I found was that of the 55 member journals using social media, the top two tools are Twitter and Facebook. This is followed pretty distantly by YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and then other tools like Weibo, GitHub. There's some stagnant Google Plus pages. And this is not surprising. It's similar to what I see more broadly in the scholarly community, and even if I look at the publishing industry as a whole, or if you look at research papers for all industries, what you see is Twitter and Facebook really dominating, And then Instagram is the hot new favorite. So that dominance of Twitter and Facebook makes sense. These are two of the oldest mainstream social media tools. There's wide public adoption of those two tools. Scholars have increasingly adopted communication tools for their professional work, and then publishers have followed suit. So LinkedIn, which is often seen as a social media tool for business, can sometimes be an underperformer, especially when it comes to LinkedIn groups. And then Instagram, which skews to a younger audience, is actually seeing really rapid user adoption. So the trade book publishers I work with are able to build audiences quickly, and their engagement rates on that tool are really high. So it's a platform to watch. And I'm not sure if anyone else is hearing this, but I keep hearing a bunch of beeps. It's not coming from my end. So I'm not sure, maybe it's people who are being muted or just joining the call, perhaps.
Is everyone able to hear Monique now? I know we had some difficulties. There were a couple of comments. People weren't having difficulties. The people who are having difficulties hearing, are you still having difficulties? If anyone is having difficulties, I suggest calling in using a phone. And in terms of the beeps, Monique, I think I forgot to set that to silent. I'll try to do that now.
Sure, thanks.
I think it is people joining and getting off line.
Sure.
Okay. So people are saying that the audio is working now. So Monique, you continue if you don't mind, and I'll see if we can work on the beeps.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
The Pavlovian dog experiments where we're all needing coffee now. So what I was saying, if your audio is going in and out, that of the 55 journals that I looked off the calj website, we have this dominance of Facebook and Twitter, which is not unusual. You see that across the board, across all industries. And so the next thing that I wanted to look at was, how does this look for you in terms of follower growth, audience size? So 60% of the journals I looked at have less than 1,000 followers on each tool. And the journals that have less than 1,000 followers typically gain 5 to 10 new followers a month, depending on what tool they're using. You can see the difference with journals that have 3,000 or more followers. On average, are seeing larger audience growth, 30 to 50 new followers per month, depending on the tool. So as a top-end example, Taylor and Francis Group has the largest audience, almost 16,000 fans on Facebook, and they get 300 new followers a month. They have a smaller audience on Twitter, 7,000, and they're seeing about 100 new followers a month. So I'm showing you this partly so you have some benchmarks. You can look at your audience size and compare your follower growth to these averages. Knowing the benchmark lets you set some targets for the quarter or for the year. It gives you something to aim for or to judge yourself against. The other reason I'm showing you this is that audience size and reach is strongly correlated with effectiveness. So the more fans you have, the more people you reach with each post, the more opportunities you create for those fans to share your content, to recommend you, and the faster you end up growing your audience. So a few definitions before we move on. Audience size, we're typically talking about the number of followers, number of people who follow your profile or your Facebook page. Follower growth, how many new people we get or how many people we lose. This tells us how quickly the journal is building up its audience. What kind of momentum do you have? Followers, reach, and impressions. These three metrics are basically related to volume. Followers, how many people like or follow your page. Reach, how many people see your post. How many people do you reach? And then impressions, how many times do people see your post? So this is kind of like in print, we talk about circulation and readership numbers. These are the numbers that we talk about in social media. And tracking followers is sometimes seen as a vanity metric because people can game the system. They can buy followers, but those reach and impression numbers tell you how widely you're distributing your content. And then the other two, engagement and engagement rate, it tells you how well that content is being received. So engagement is the number of likes, comments, and shares. Now, audience size isn't everything. Maybe you are a niche publication, your audience is naturally small, that's fine. If you have less than 1,000 followers and low engagement on social media, your focus up until this point has probably been on establishing your social media presence. So if you're in that bottom left quadrant, I recommend using profiles that are set up completely and optimized for discoverability. So I have a bunch of tips we'll get into about ways to help your audience find you and then be compelled to follow you. Because the goal, if you're in that bottom left corner, is to increase reach and then work on engagement. So if you're above that, in the top left, you have a small but active audience. You're in engagement mode. So the same recommendations. You want to make sure your profiles are optimized, but the goal here is scaling up. You want to increase your posting frequency. So posting more often leads to higher reach. Higher reach leads to more followers, more opportunities to generate traffic for your journal website. So in general, posting 3 to 5 times a day on Twitter, 2 to 3 times a day on Facebook. I can hear you already saying, oh my God, no, right? It can sound overwhelming, even spammy, but I have tips on how you repurpose content and then build out a plan. For those of you who are in scaling mode, that bottom right corner, your strength is in creating a volume of content. You've built up an audience. So now is the time to use analytics data to learn what your audience loves. I'll show you where to find those key metrics in analytics because your goal needs to be maintaining the reach, but tapping into what resonates with your audience so you get more word of mouth, more sharing. And of course, the aim is to be in that leader quadrant in the top right corner. If you're here or moving here, it means you have a good, solid strategy and you want to continue to grow. Reach and engagement is still going to be important, but your goal starts shifting to conversion and revenue generation. So when that social audience comes to your website, do they read the articles? Do they share those articles? Do they subscribe or advertise or sign up to your email newsletter or do any action that is of value to you? So I'll show you where to look in analytics for that information. So I want to jump into the tips. We're going to look at 3 main areas. How do we increase reach? How do we increase engagement? And how do we scale in a strategic way so we have efficient ways to produce this content and can start moving beyond reach and engagement and actually talking about how we use social to generate some money. So a quick way to increase reach is to advertise to your existing followers. I know that seems counterintuitive, but each post only reaches a very small percentage of your fans. Sometimes only 1% of your fans see any given post. Even if you spend $5 a month, maybe $20 a month, right? That's a good investment. Your followers are people who have said, yes, I'm interested in your content, but then they don't see it. The Twitter and Facebook newsfeed algorithms determine what posts each individual person sees. And those algorithms are skewed to show us posts from friends and brands who we've interacted with recently, or to show us posts that have high engagement, likes, comments, shares, from people in our social network. So that makes it really hard to compete organically if you are a niche publication and post infrequently, or you have a small audience, or you have an audience who are light to moderate social media users. They're not there doing the likes, the comments, and the shares on the social media. So it makes it difficult to tap into that algorithm unless you invest some money in the advertising, in particular to your existing followers. That's the key. Another quick, easy way to increase reach is to post more often. I mentioned 3 times a day on Twitter, 2 to 3 times a day on Facebook. The key here is scheduling your posts so that they appear more than once. When you have new original content that you're posting, on Twitter you want to post that immediately, and then you repost the next day. And then the same thing the next week, and then the next month, and then monthly if it is still relevant content. Facebook and LinkedIn, you post immediately and then you repost it a week later and then every 2 to 3 months. I should say these are not identical posts. You want to make slight modifications and experiment with different images, slightly different phrasing, but for the most part, they can be the same. Free tools. TweetDeck is a great tool for Twitter managing and scheduling content. You can see all the relevant information you need in a single dashboard view. You can follow particular hashtags, you can post schedules, you can plan things in advance. So you create some efficiencies by doing things up front. All of these tools listed in the top have free plans. I'm a big fan of Buffer and Hootsuite. And then paid plans, paying for a Hootsuite or CoSchedule or Agora Pulse, I'd say those are kind of my top 3 favorites in that list. So we're moving into some of the more detail with these tips. The tip 3 is optimizing your social media profiles in order to ensure that your journal shows up in search results for your journal name, common acronyms, and relevant hashtags. So hashtags, if you don't know this word, these are words or phrases that are written with the pound or hash sign in front of them. And in social media tools, it makes those searchable terms. So social media users can follow a particular hashtag. Now, regardless of how people end up finding your social media profile, you want the way that you have set up the profile to reinforce the value of following your page. So I would say even if you're active online, don't zone out. Don't underestimate the value of these kind of housekeeping tips. So the task is to look at your social media profiles the way a new visitor would. Ask, are you putting your best foot forward? So here's the Twitter account for 18th Century Fiction, ECF, a McMaster University journal. New visitors are going to look at the profile photo or the avatar, the little circle. They'll look at the header photo, the follower count, the bio, and the first post. These are quick, fast things that we do in order to decide in a 20th of a second whether this is a page that we want to follow or not. So there's lots of best practices happening here. I'll tell you what I see and like. In marketing speak, this is good branding. It's clear that it's 18th century. The profile photo works well. We've got Afra Ben, one of the most important early feminists in British history. So that's playful. There's a recognizable figure here. There's a bit of an insider kind of thing if you recognize the avatar. And it's nice to follow a person versus a logo. So the header and profile photo are working nicely together. That follower count, 4,000, that's great. And then there's a pinned tweet at the top with the call for articles. And there's lots of shares and likes on that post. So the follower count and the engagement on the first post provides a social proof to new visitors that, oh, hey, this is an account worth following. The next thing people will look at if they're unsure is the bio. This is where you want to position the journal. Be really clear. What is it? Who's it for? So what? So we've got good text here that identifies the editors and some of the house rules, no DMs, please. If these editors are on Twitter, you might include their handle, their @username versus their full name because you help people understand other ways to follow the journal. And then somewhere in the bio text, for this particular journal, I would say you want the word journal in the text and the word 18th spelled out, not just the number. If scholars are searching Twitter for 18th century and they spell out the word 18th, then this journal unfortunately doesn't appear in search results. Now, it's a dumb computer, right? So as marketers, we have to work around it. And showing up is half the battle, especially if you have a bilingual journal or a long journal name. You have to find ways to help the computer be smarter, to get those keywords and variations of the words into your username, the display name, and the bio. So if we look at our profiles with fresh eyes, ask yourself, do I have a good profile photo? Are there keywords in the name, username, and bio? Do I have a good pinned tweet that shows visitors my most important content? So that could be an announcement about a new issue. It could be a call for papers. It could be a post that has a lot of engagement on it that is kind of recent. You can pin whatever you want there. The other thing I would say when you're having a quick check is don't forget the URL linking to your journal. Some of the journal profiles that I looked at in my research were actually missing the URL. So there's no way for me to find your website unless I now go to Google and search for it. So don't underestimate the value of cleaning up this little bio and making sure that all the elements, especially the ones I've highlighted in the orange box, are there. You want to use that space as best as possible to convince people to follow you. So thinking about your journal and how it appears in the search results, this is an example search for law journal. A good profile photo, this is the first important step, and especially if you can have a consistent image that works on all your social platforms. The profile photo should be an image that can stand on its own. You remember, people are going to see it in their news feed. They're only once or twice going to come to your profile page and see the bigger, fuller image. Most of the time, they're scrolling through on a mobile device with their thumb. It's a very small screen, so you want that profile photo to be recognizable quickly. Journals have a habit of changing the profile photo to be the cover of their latest journal issue. Presumably, this is a cue to their followers that a new issue is out. The problem is that the journal cover isn't always your best profile photo. It's busy. It is often not recognizable in the time frame. The texts are cut off. This is the same problem with logos that work well in landscape, but not as round or square profile photos. So I would say go back to tip number one. Instead of changing the profile photo when you want to announce a new issue of the journal, do that through a small ad campaign targeting a Twitter list or your followers. The next element to consider is the bio. If you were, say, the Journal of Ocean Technology and someone is searching for ocean technology, you want to show up in the results. So the JOT Newfoundland, this may be recognizable to existing journal readers, but if you're a potential reader and you're searching for Journal of Ocean Technology or you're searching ocean technology, again, you want to show up in the search results. And then you have this 160 characters in the bio to add in those words. And here you want to consider what are popular hashtags that are relevant to your journal content. Things like hashtag ocean literacy or hashtag blue economy, hashtag ocean tech. Right, every journal is going to have a different context, but guaranteed there are hashtags that are topics or themes or categories relevant to your journal. Even say if you're open access, there's a conversation happening online around hashtag OA or hashtag open access. So you can signal in your bio your communities of interest. You want to make sure the Twitter profile is 100% complete. So that means header image, usually bright pop of color to help you stand out, profile photo that's easy, iconic. You can recognize it in that tiny, tiny size. Display name, username, bio, you've got that 160 characters to convince people to follow you. Don't forget the URL. Ideally pin some content that has high engagement, and then make sure you're following that with posts that make active use of features in the tool. So the @ mentions, the hashtags, strategically retweeting content from contributors, peers, industry influencers, advertisers, ways to get on people's radar. This is the same thing you want to do on Facebook. Make sure the profile is 100% complete. The setup differs a little bit by network, but in general, you want to double check exactly the same elements. Profile photo, cover, display name, username. And ideally, you have a consistent display name and username across all your social media platforms. UTP Journals is a great example. They were able to get the same username on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. The blog is blog.utpjournals.com. This is great branding because it makes it super easy to remember the username and to share that or recommend it to other people. Facebook has a few new features that a lot of the journals I looked at are not yet taking advantage of. So I want to call those out. And the first is this button at the top. It's a call to action button. The default is send message. You can hover over that button if you are signed in as the page admin and you have an edit function. You can change this to something else. If you have an email newsletter, change this button to sign up and have it go to help people sign up and build your email list. If you don't have email, turn it to learn more and make it link to your journal website. So you want to use that call to action button effectively. A good thing that this particular page is doing, they have reviews. And reviews on Facebook are part of that social proof along with the number of fans. So you can request fans of the page help you out, review the page, and this is also going to improve the way that your Facebook page appears in search results. So if you have the little stars beside your name, it's another way to help your journal or your page stand out amongst others that would be similar or competing, showing up for the same search term. If you click on the About in the left-hand navigation, Facebook has this new story feature. So in the end of 2018, so just a couple of months ago, Facebook changed it so that our story, there's now this image and text that appear. And that little box acts like your Twitter bio. This is where you want to position the journal. What is it? Who is it for? Why is this worth following? So what I really like here are the images of people. It's hard to follow a logo, right? This page looks bright and fun and friendly. There's lots of smiling faces. So, anytime you can get some images or background scenes, help people feel more personal connection to your page, that's going to be helpful. Below the Our Story box are contact details. Don't leave this blank. If you have calls for submission or an editorial contact or subscription details, make sure that they appear in that section. And this is also edited under the About tab. And then last is the pages liked by this page. So most of the time, this is a random assortment of the pages that your page has liked, but you can actually set what appears here by going to Settings, picking Featured from the dropdown, and then selecting what pages appear here. So it's a great way to signal who you're associated with or who's within your community. If your publisher or your institution is active on social media, or you have peer journals or partners, see what they have as their pages liked, and you can ask to be a feature here, right? So that you can make these connections and have another way that people can discover your particular page. While we're talking about settings, sometimes you have a trailing series of numbers after your username. So you can change this in Facebook by clicking About on the left-hand side of your page and then editing the username field. This is also where you go to change your display name or to add the story image and text or to update the contact details. Now, if you need to change your Twitter username or display name, there are two separate places on Twitter. So I can see in the chat that our slides are a bit behind. Hopefully you'll be able to see this little animation, but I'll describe what's happening. You click on your profile image, and then you select Settings and Privacy from the dropdown, and this is where the username field is set. If you want to change the display name, the name beside your username, you go to Profile and you click the Edit Profile button, which is at the far right. That's what takes you into edit mode. So then you can hover over the display name. This is where the bio is, the cover image, the profile image, all of that gets changed in that section. So you want to make sure your Facebook profile is also 100% complete, and especially look at those key elements on the left, the same things as Twitter, and then make sure you're taking full advantage of these new features that are now appearing on the right-hand column on Facebook's desktop view of your pages. Moving on to the engagement component, I would say social media is a bit like dieting. You can do two things. You can do more exercise, or you can improve what you eat. Ideally, of course, you do the two together. So social media, you can do more. You can reach more people, increase your post frequency to be seen more often, or you can improve what you're doing. You can be more effective with what you do post. So let me tell you why I think this post from Karen Freiberg is an example of an effective post. Karen runs the Social Media Profs Facebook group. She's an author, marketing prof, consultant. Her pinned tweet is an announcement about the Cannes Line Education Summit. So the first question you can ask in a self-assessment is, okay, is the text in my post useful and relevant? Attract attention and prompt the action that I want. So this particular post, yes, it's an interesting announcement for her followers, who are social media profs and practitioners. She's making good use of emojis and special characters so her post stands out in her followers' newsfeed. We have to remember her audience is marketers and marketing professors, so their newsfeeds are going to be really busy with all the marketers using all the tricks. So she has to stand out using these emojis. That might seem not appropriate for your audience, but another tactic she's using that you can certainly use is adding line breaks. She's adding spaces in her post to make it more vertical and to take up more real estate. And she's also using vertical video versus a static image, again, to take up more space. And it's great because it's an announcement, it's her voice talking to you, it captures people's attention. This is a great tactic you could use if you have editorial content. Maybe if your editor is not camera shy, you can get them to take part of what they're saying in an editorial piece and record that as a little video that accompanies a post announcing a new issue. Other things to consider, if you want to drive traffic to your website, you want to make sure there's a clear call to action and a link in your social media post. It's hard for people to leave social media. The tools are engineered to keep us in the particular tool, not to go away somewhere to read content. So it means you have to create an incentive for someone to come away from Twitter or Facebook and actually go to your website to read content. Another thing that you want to make sure you're doing in your post is using all the features of the platform. So emojis, tagging people, especially your contributors, and using hashtags. So Instagram and Twitter is especially important for the hashtags. People follow these particular tags sometimes rather than following an organization. So you'll see it where there's a hashtag for a conference. People follow the conference hashtag, not necessarily the company organizing the conference. I follow a tag that's hashtag good for teaching, right? Because I'm looking for articles that are good for use in an educational setting. So Instagram, 5 to 7 hashtags, right? Twitter, we're going to use maybe 2 to 3. Instagram, you're going to blow it out of the water. It's like 5 to 7 hashtags. And National Geographic is really a leader when it comes to effective social media. There's lots of things that journals can borrow from their strategy playbook. In the slides that you'll have, there's a link to a case study that Social Bakers did on National Geographic. It's from 2014, but all the tactics still apply. So a couple of call-outs. They always credit the contributor up front in the post. So they link to that contributor. I would say as part of the editorial process, when you're taking submissions and agreeing to publish, ask for the username and what tools your contributors are using so that when you post your post about the new issue, you can link to those contributors. You want to create that halo effect where they start to reshare your content or they share content and link to you or attribute you in the post. The other tactic National Geographic uses is in Instagram, they have really long text, much longer than what most people post. And whenever there is behind the scenes footage or content in an upcoming issue, they always note that. There's a call to action to go check out that issue. And then of course it's National Geographic, so it's great images. A tactic for journals to be effective here would be to tap into a meme or a recurring theme or hashtag that you can use regularly. So Canadian Journal of History, they're tapping into the hashtag Travel Tuesday. We've got Motivation Monday, Women Wednesday, Throwback Thursday, Friday Reads. These are all things that can be applicable for journals. And what you're going to do is schedule your posts around content that you compile for these particular hashtags. So you can do that in advance and then schedule it out, especially thinking about how to schedule posts for the weekend. 9 to 5, that 9 to 5 workday may not be when your audience is online and using social media. So you want to look to schedule things where when your audience is online, and also try to think about what article content or factoids or relevant quotes or statistics are of interest to my audience. Can you compile those and then schedule them out? So Canadian Journal of History, for example, could compile on this day type of content. Or if you're the Canadian Journal of Career Development, maybe you compile tips around Tips Tuesday, so Career Tips Tuesday. Center for Constitutional Studies, or if you are a journal related to law or criminology, you could look for anniversary dates of particular things that you can then use as an anchor for drawing people to related content on those topics. So another way to increase post frequency, instead of trying to find hashtags, is to really think about how do you repurpose your existing material. So when I'm thinking through an editorial calendar, the image that hopefully you see is a series of sticky notes. It's all over my floor. They kept falling off the wall. But what I'm doing is I'm repurposing 12 articles into 100 different pieces of social media content. So a challenge for publishers is always like, oh, I create this one great piece of content and promote it once, and then I've got to forget about it and move on. So we don't want to waste these resources. We want to find ways to repurpose the content, to extend the life of each piece of content, and that's a way to start scaling up strategically. Think about lists of articles or table of contents. Can you turn each article into an individual social media post that then points to the full issue? If you have articles or book reviews, maybe you can find pull quotes that you can turn into images that then show that quote, and you share that as social media posts. Or maybe you've got editorial content that you can repurpose as a little video or a podcast or a slide presentation or an infographic. This is an example from Canadian Historical Review. So the new issue announcement had 3 different types of articles: tobacco workers, gays of Ontario, and First Canadian Bank strike. So from one issue announcement, we get multiple posts, each providing more detail on a single topic within the issue, and then each post with relevant hashtags for the topic. So I build out more hashtags for each of these topics as a way to get on the radar of people who are searching for or following particular topics. But what I really like about this example is the image is templated. The idea is you want to make it quick and easy to drop in different background images. And there are free tools like Canva that offer thousands of templates. It makes it easy for you to pick a style that is going to have fonts or colors that work for your journal. And then you can just easily drag and drop in different images. If you think I don't have images, there are lots of free stock photography images from photographers that don't make it look like stock photography. So you just need to find some type of image that is symbolic of the content that you can use in a background way. So if we come back to this example, instead of also just assessing the effectiveness of each individual post, oh, I didn't get likes, comments, and shares on this one post, the idea is you start looking at the cumulative effects of the increased reach. So instead of having one post, one chance to send people to the journal website, here we have an example with 4. And when you're in that scaling up mode, or you're being more strategic about your social media efforts, you want to see the outcomes. What happens when social traffic arrives on your website, lands on your website? So this is one of my favorite reports from Google Analytics. It's the landing page report. So you send traffic to your website. Where do they land? What's the first page they see? So what we have in the screenshot is the top 10 landing pages for this particular website. And it's sorted by sessions, which is the number of visits to that page. And because the client has goals set up, we have to set goals up within Google Analytics, tell the machine what we care about. So what we're tracking here is member sign-up. It means that in this landing page report, we can see which landing pages are actually driving conversions, which pages lead more often to people signing up to be a member. And that's good guidance for what kind of landing pages we want to share more often in social media. Another thing, when you're scaling strategically, you also want to rely more heavily on the analytics. So within Google Analytics, users can see, you can see your users by time of day. So when is your audience active and online? Facebook Insights offers similar data. So again, you want to use this as guidance for when to post your social media content. And I would say aim for times a day when people are active, but also look for some of those sweet spots that are outside of the 9 to 5 hump when people are commuting or they're relaxing after dinner. They're in more social and reading mode, and there's less clutter and activity because there's less people trying to market and pitch to them during that time. So frequency and time of day are important when you're trying to scale up. What we're looking at on the screen is a new account. It's their Twitter analytics. There's very little activity here. But what you can see is even the difference between 3 tweets a month versus 5 tweets a month. The big increase in the number of profile visits, in the number of new mentions and impressions. So this is the homepage of analytics.twitter.com. If you have a Twitter account, you just log into this the exact same way you do to Twitter, and you can see your top tweets, top mentions, top followers. It's all good insight into what content your audience likes and shares. If you tab over to the tweets section, you can see the top tweets for each month. You can organize this list. And what you want to do first is just look visually for what stands out. Are there posts with emojis that are doing better than others? Are there certain trends or hashtags or at mentions that keep showing up? And then better still, export the data. Export it to Excel or Google Sheets or whatever you use, because then you can start looking for what are the posts with higher than average impressions and engagement rate. Can I repost, reschedule some of that content that was performing well? You can do the exact same thing in Facebook Insights. So the main Insights page shows a list of the top 5 posts, and you can view a full log list. But my recommendation is to export that data. You export the post data so you can see the actual reach and impressions for each post. You want the numeric value because then you can calculate what the actual engagement rate is. And more important, you can see what content got link clicks. So on this main Facebook page, what we see is post clicks. That means someone clicked somewhere in the post. They could have clicked the more button to expand. They could have clicked to watch a video. What you get through the export is link clicks, people clicking to come through to your website. So another Facebook Insights feature I like is the Pages to Watch section. You can add 4 to 5 competitor Facebook pages to a list. That way you can kind of compare. How are you doing in comparison to a competitor or a peer? You can monitor any page that your audience might be interested in. And what that then tells you is how you're doing in comparison with the number of times you're posting a week or the page likes or engagement. But even more important, you can see the top posts from those pages that you're watching. So see what content they're posting that gets engagement. And this is really great insight if you don't have a large audience or if you have low engagement. You can use this tool to track what is working for other people, what kind of tactics can work for you. The other way to use this feature, along with Twitter lists, would be to create content for an audience who's not active on social media. So if you're mailing out your journal, then maybe you run a postcard campaign, and the postcard invites people to sign up for your newsletter. And through your newsletter, you provide a curated list of popular content you've curated from social media that you think they might not want to miss, right? So you try to find a way to generate some value from the social media activity, even if you're only in listen and monitor mode. Can you listen and monitor and curate content and then provide it to your audience in a way that's valuable, and maybe not through social media? Maybe they're an email audience, or maybe you have a blog and you compile this content, but you use social media to generate other ways of activity and interaction with your audience. So given the time, I want to wrap up and leave open for questions. So in summary or priority order, things that I would do. Whether you're planning your online presence or you're auditing your existing profiles, I would say you want to double check that you have optimized each of those profiles. Again, don't underestimate the value of basic housekeeping. So you want to optimize those profiles and double check that the social media links on your website are actually working. So we have social media links in our website, often in our email signatures. Most of the LinkedIn group icons that I clicked on were broken. Sometimes I would click on a Twitter icon and it looks like maybe someone had set up a Twitter account for you at one point and then they disappeared from the organization. They were probably an intern. So then there was another account set up, and sometimes these links that we're using to promote our stuff are not working or broken or going to the wrong place. Priority 2, I would say, to be focused on reach. Social media is more like traditional advertising than people like to think. So I would start with advertising to your existing fans. Ensure that they see your content. I also recommend increasing the post frequency. So figure out ways to repurpose your content, to use those scheduling tools to reshare content, and then work on fine-tuning for engagement. What you ultimately care about is the conversions. So does social media drive readership and subscription or other actions of value? And if those actions happen on your website, not on social media, then when you're scaling up strategically, you need to pay more attention to the analytics. That means exporting the Twitter and Facebook data so you can make better use of it, especially looking for what content drives people to your website. And if you have a website where you can install Google Analytics code to track what happens with that website traffic on your site, then that's the way that you're going to see the impact from social media, where you can start attributing the social media activity to conversions that are happening. Things like subscriptions, subscription renewal, new followers, all of that kind of activity. So I will leave it there for today. So we have our time for Q&A. And what I would say is, as we figure out the questions, make a note for yourself of like the first 3 things that come to mind. I often use a technique called circle, square, triangle. So what is circling around in my head that I don't get, that I probably need to read some more about? What do I have squared away? And what are 3 things that I want to try right now? So I find that if I circle, square, triangle, often then I actually implement the takeaways or things that I learned through webinars that I attend myself. So thank you very much. I greatly appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Minik. That was really informative, and your slides are fantastic. A lot of great tips scattered throughout, and a lot of information packed in the slides. Thank you also for offering to share them with the participants. I think that will be very helpful. I know I find myself sometimes after a webinar, I chew on the information, and reviewing the slides again helps bring ideas back to mind, so that's great. I also want to thank everyone for your participation today and for your patience. I'm sorry about the beeps. Unfortunately, we couldn't turn them off at this point, and it seems my impression is that a few people had some difficulties logging in, so a number of people were logging in and out. So I'm sorry again about the disruption there. But if you have any questions, please let us know through the chat functions, and we'll take as many questions as we have. I could start, Minik, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
I really appreciated the metaphor that you used in terms of social media being like a diet. I thought that was fantastic. You want to do more exercise, but also you want to improve what you eat. Can you speak a little bit more about when we think about engagement, especially if the journal starts with a small audience to begin with? Can you speak a little bit more about how we can do both things, eat a little bit more, eat a little bit better, but also improve, do more with the amount of time that is available?
Yes, I would say what you want to do is chat with your team about where in the workflow you might introduce some more social media content. So when you're trying to create a good habit, to stick to our dieting metaphor, you want to find things that you're already doing. So one bonus tip that actually answers this question, not planned, but bonus tip, is to use what's called a tentpole strategy. So entertainment and media companies do this. If you think about movie launches, there's a bunch of publicity in advance, and weekend sales are really important, and then they fan the flames to get moviegoers to post reviews and recommend the film. And when things start to die down, there's a timed release for DVDs and Blu-ray and airline and Netflix kind of stuff. So even with a really small audience or a small team, you can take this kind of approach. You want it to be driven by editorial, someone who's familiar with the contributors and the content and the community. So what I would say is pre-issue activities, you want to think about, are there ways to ramp up interest? So you have an idea for an issue, you have a call for papers. Those are great things to use as a pinned tweet on social media. If you are using Twitter lists, a list is a way to follow people without following them. So you add people to a Twitter list. It means that you can then do Twitter advertising to a list. So if you have a list or you belong to a listserv where you typically share the call for papers, you're thinking about, like, can I post that on social media in advance? Can I promote that to my email list or to my Facebook followers? That's another good way to spend, even $2 or $5 to get that post out to your existing audience. And if your editor is not camera shy, you could do the little video of them talking about what they're looking for that particular issue. Leading up to publication, when you have the abstracts and the submissions, you often have keywords that are related to that article. So turn those keywords into the hashtags that you're going to use for creating social media posts about that particular article. If you are writing an editorial, you can, again, repurpose that kind of editorial content, even if it's a quote with an image. And then you can switch up your pin. So the call for papers is gone, but now here's the new social media pin announcing the new journal. And for the engagement part, I'd say, you advertise to your followers and target people on Twitter lists or do some outreach, tagging the contributors and getting them to share, direct messaging peer reviewers if they're on social media, letting them know the issue is out. You're just sort of trying to prime the pump and get the engagement going. So then post-issue, you're trying to look at, well, what might be, comments that are controversial or up for discussion, or where does this research lead? You can think about, how do you create questions or scholarly discussion and use that Canva tool to put the quote or the question into something visual that allows you to take up a bit more space and grab some attention online.
That's great. Thank you. And you did speak quite a bit about memes and hashtags, and you had some really great examples. Travel Tuesday is one that I hadn't heard before. Do you have any tips or suggestions for how journals might be able to find what the trends are, any particular, especially given that there are some variations across disciplines? Maybe the history field may be a little bit different from the literature field. Do you find that there are a lot of variations from that kind of perspective? And more broadly, do you have any suggestions for how journals might approach doing the kind of research that might be needed in order to find the right way to captivate an audience?
Yeah, so I start with the keywords that come in as part of the article submission, so usually from the contributors. And then what I do, I typically start on Twitter. So in the search box on Twitter, I'll start entering those keywords with the hash symbol or symbol in front. And from the search results, I'll end up spotting other variations or things that I might not have thought of, or people that I want to follow. And so what happens in Twitter is that if you find an account or page that you think is interesting, then what you can do is, instead of following, there's this little like stacked dots besides that follow button, and you can add to a list. So I'll sometimes add people to a list so that I can see these are people who are actively talking about this topic, and I want to monitor what keyword tool, like what hashtags are they using, or how are they talking about this. I sometimes I have a little list of like ways that people start talking about a topic that I think, oh, that's a good way to describe this article or to present this particular piece of content. So I start with the Twitter search and kind of build up a quick little list of people that I can monitor using TweetDeck as an example. And then there are tools like hashtagify.me or all-hashtags.org. These are hashtag generators or tools that let you search for related hashtags. So if I find a good thread and I want to see, well, what else might I be missing, then some of those tools can be helpful as well for quick suggestions.
That's a great tip again. I know Twitter Storians is one I've heard among
yes.
on history group, which is a great one.
Yeah, it is. I love puns.
Yeah. So we've had a question about any big differences between journal audiences and common company audiences. Are there any specific behaviors that you see in terms of how, I guess, a journal audience might respond to engagement or posting versus a company audience? And how would you adapt social media language and present a professional look to the academic audience?
Yes, so like the general public, it's such a broad spectrum because, of course, the academics in marketing and consumer retail are using all the things that might look very spammy to someone who's studying, Merton, right? or English literature or theater. So you want to figure out, again, I use the Twitter list for this to kind of listen to what's the nature or culture of my audience. As a metaphor, it's like joining a cocktail party with people you don't know. You don't want to just walk up and be rude or too flashy or whatever, so you gauge the audience. And, the Twitter, as a list, you want to follow people who are relevant, but you can add people to a list and you can make that list private so they don't know that you're following. It doesn't publicly display. So I do a lot of listening and monitoring to figure out how does this audience like to interact. Anyone who's involved with librarianship or open access, marketing, science, those communities tend to be active online, and they're very personable and they use all the features of the tool. So it's pretty easy to adapt what you might be doing for consumer marketing to marketing to those audiences. If you feel like, listen, these emojis and the madness is not for me, adding in the line breaks, so making your post stand out, have some more real estate, vertical video content gets a lot more attention through those newsfeed algorithms. So it's like repurposing, finding different ways to say the same thing, but through a different format. That can be a way to still be professional, but tap into some of the things that are working in, social media in a broader scope.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like one theme I've heard a number of times is posting multiple times and in multiple places. And I suspect maybe it has something to do with the fact that our audience, our attention spans are so there's so much information pulling at our attention spans.
Yes. Well, part of it is that these news feeds are very cluttered. And part of it is that those algorithms are not going to show your post to everybody all the time. So you're trying to put your content into the queue more often so that you're considered more often for your post to actually show up in someone's news feed. So they're not going to see, the algorithms want social media to be a good experience for their users. So they're not going to show your post over and over and over again, even if you've scheduled it to show up on Twitter 15 times a day. Your audience isn't going to see that post 15 times a day. So you're accommodating for the fact that behind the scenes are these algorithms that are determining what people are going to see. And all you're doing is stacking the deck in your favor. So you're giving yourself more chances for your content to show up. And as long as your post isn't just the identical content rescheduled multiple times, you make just small variations, change the image. Even if your audience sees that post a second time, because their attention span, they might have been thumbing through the first version of the post they saw and didn't stop, but then they stop and pay attention to the second one or maybe the third one.
Mm-hmm. That's a great tip. Well, thank you very much. Really great information, and once again, really appreciate your time and all of the information that you shared with us today. And thank you to everyone for participating, and thank you also again for your patience. And once again, I'm sorry that the beats were as disruptive as they were, but I hope that you did find the information to be quite valuable. I certainly learned a lot, and once again, Minik, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate all of your time as well. Have a great social media day.
Thank you so much. We will put into practice all of the learnings shortly.
Yes, very good.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.